I'm here with Anthony Macías, author of Mexican American Mojo, Popular Music, Dance, and Urban Culture in Los Angeles, 1935 to 1968. Anthony, you assert that Mexican Americans transformed Los Angeles during the post-war period. How?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. One of the main areas, aside from the Zoot Suits in the wartime period, in the post-war period, the successors to the Zoot Suiters, the successors to the Pachucos and the Pachucas were Cholos and Cholas, so they influenced post-war fashion, sort of Southern California casual wear, sort of a tough guy aesthetic that was picked up on by middle-class white youths. Chola style as well, the female successors to the Pachucas, sort of their slang, their attitude, their fashion. The Cholos and the Cholas are associated with lowrider culture, lowered customized cars, so the car cruisers certainly influenced post-war Los Angeles as far as car cruising and car culture and car clubs, and the whole sort of lowrider aesthetic, which now there are lowriders all over the States and all over the world, and not to mention the Latin music scene. And in general, I argue Mexican Americans forced, Los Angeles was a very Midwestern migrant white city, so they forced the city, a monolingual English, sort of highbrow cultural city. Chicanos forced them to acknowledge, really their long neglected and often abused Mexican descent residents.
Los Angeles was one of America's most segregated large cities during this time period, yet there was still ethnic mixing. Can you talk about the relationship between Mexican Americans and African Americans during the post-war period?
Definitely. That is the core of the project. That was sort of from its inception. The relationship between blacks and Chicanos was my window into the period, and they're kind of kindred spirits as far as popular music, vernacular dance, fashion and style and slang, and they definitely borrowed from one another and influenced one another, particularly in the swing and jitterbug era. And of course everyone talks about the Zoot Suits, so I have a chapter on the Zoot Suits, but really Zoot Suiters were, African Americans invented the Zoot Suit, and Mexican Americans in Southern California created their own version of the Zoot Suit. Pachucas had their own sort of slow, cooler, stoic version of the jitterbug, for example. As far as rhythm and blues, blacks and Chicanos were at the forefront. Los Angeles had a lot of independent rhythm and blues labels, and Chicanos were their main supporters. Mexican Americans, after World War II, were the main bread and butter audience for African American rhythm and blues artists, so given their crucial participation in all of these genres, over time, I make an argument for what I call multicultural urban civility, where blacks and Chicanos were spearheading this movement to sort of fight segregation, challenge segregation in different neighborhoods, and really bring all the citizenry of the city and really the surrounding region together, fostering mutual appreciation, sort of intercultural understanding, racial tolerance. So in a segregated world, in a segregated city like Los Angeles, de facto segregation, I argue blacks and Chicanos, this relationship at the core of the book was really fueling the different music scenes and really pushing, again, sort of a monolingual, middle to highbrow and Midwestern migrant sort of white city, pushing it to really embrace its multiculturalism. Now, I should say, on the flip side of that, I make a case for cooperation, but I did find instances of conflict between Mexican Americans and African Americans. So I make this argument for civility and tolerance, and yet there is, anti-black racism among Chicanos and anti-Mexican racism among blacks. So that's part of my story as well, that I report what I find from my sources.
Music is a major focus of your book. What influence did Mexican Americans have on the development of rock and roll and jazz?
Thank you. I get that question a lot when I present my work. Certainly, I've mentioned the influence sort of in the swing and jitterbug era. In the post-war period, a lot of people are discovering this genre, Pachuca Boogie, this sort of subgenre. So I write a lot about that. The proponents of that were Don Tosti and his Pachuca Boogie Boys, and Lalo Guerrero and his band, the Cinco Lobos. So Don Tosti and Lalo Guerrero really merged the Pachuco slang with African American jump blues in particular, the sort of early rhythm and blues. So they also brought a lot of Latin rhythms and Latin sort of piano styles to what's called Pachuca Boogie. So it's black boogie woogie plus Pachuco slang and attitude. But what's not often known is the B-sides and the other songs that weren't rhythm and blues, boogie woogie, jump blues, were Latin tunes. They were rumbas and Afro-Cuban rhythms. So that's one influence. I talk about a gentleman named Gil Bernal. He was a singer and a saxophonist. So, you know, he played straight ahead jazz. He also played rhythm and blues with the Robins, for example, backing up the Robins. He played the saxophone on Riot in Cell Block Number 9 and Smokey Joe's Cafe and some of their hits. But what's also little known is Gil Bernal played with Chet Baker, Shelly Manne, and some of the West Coast, you know, cool jazz, the California jazz. Another gentleman I write about, Anthony Ortega, was a Chicano saxophonist, and he also played with some of the California, you know, the white West Coast jazz cats, particularly at the Hermosa Beach Lighthouse. And Anthony Ortega and Gil Bernal also played with Lionel Hampton and sort of an all-black orchestra. And finally, Anthony Ortega in particular was really an avant-garde jazz saxophonist. So later in his career, into the 60s, he put out some really creative sort of free jazz, what they call it, but he never got his due, he felt, because he wasn't white and he wasn't black. He wasn't seen as an innovator, and he wasn't part of the cool California West Coast jazz scene. And, you know, there's other gifted improvisers, composers, and arrangers, such as the trumpeter Paul Lopez, who I write about a lot, and another jazz saxophonist named Ruben Leon. So these are really unsung heroes and unheralded sort of musicians, and they kind of get left out of black and white jazz history. And then one other thing I should mention, in the realm of style and fashion, I try to make an argument for duck-tailed, leather-jacketed Pachucos and Mexican Americans during World War II, really influencing post-war sort of rebel without a cause rocker style. You know, if you think about the post-war rockers, they had leather jackets, blue jeans, cuffed at the bottom, and long slick back hair, which was essentially the way young Mexican Americans looked during World War II, Pachucos and non-Pachucos. But I think one of the strengths of my book is I'm really trying to refigure American music studies and, as I said, jazz history, popular music studies, rock and roll, and Latin histories by, you know, recreating this time and place, telling these hidden histories of these sort of unsung heroes and these little-known performers and musicians. Just that Mexican Americans were crucial co-creators and participants in really all of these periods of American history. You know, I'm kind of making an argument. Mexican Americans were part of the greatest generation. You know, they were part of these music scenes, and people might not know these names or know these histories, but we were there. You know, Chicanos were there. They played an integral part of American history, from the Great Depression to the Vietnam War. From the greatest generation, like I said, to the sort of post-war baby boom, you know, 1960s youth culture. So Chicanos, Mexican Americans influenced Los Angeles urban culture, jazz, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, and Latin music in the post-war period. I rest my case.
Thank you, Anthony, and congratulations on your book.